Monday, the B'nai B'rith Canada has called on the Ontario NDP party to withdraw the candidacy of Sarah Jama, who they describe as a radical activist who has been associated with groups that have frequently targeted Israel. There's a lot to this story, and our next guest has been covering it extensively. John Best, publisher of the Bay Observer, joins us here on the Bill Kelly Show to give us some insight into this. John, thank you for the time. Good to have you with us, especially I want to thank you, first of all, for the work you've done on this story. This as I mentioned just before we did the news update here, it's not often that a by-election in the middle of Hamilton makes international news, but that's what's happening here, isn't it?
Certainly is, Bill. It's I don't know how much internationally. I mean, it is certainly in the media in Israel as a result of the intervention by the B'nai B'rith. But I wrote the article in part because I felt that frankly, the local media have not done a very good job of covering this debate at all. And, typically when you're covering a political campaign, especially a by-election where there's no other distractions, you focus on the candidates a little bit, and that involves focusing on their past. And, a first-year journalism student could go online and check out Sarah Jama's social media posts and see that she holds some very controversial views about Israel. Her views on police go beyond defund the police. She appeared at a Palestinian rally less than 2 years ago where she talked about abolishing police. And the irony is, the party is absolutely backing her, and there are numerous anti-NDP posts on her social media feed, largely, in fairness, aimed at the federal party. But she's anti-police, anti-federal NDP at least, and certainly anti-Israel. There's no getting around it. And I think the news coverage has been really deficient in that area. It's, when we're in a one newspaper town, I think there's a little more responsibility on the part of that outlet to try to dig into people's background. And certainly, I think we all know that if the conservative candidate had a social media profile that looked like this, it would not be ignored by the Spectator. But for some reason, they've simply airbrushed all of this out of her profile. And the interesting thing, Bill, is since I published the story on earlier this week, the next day, hundreds of these tweets had been removed. They just disappeared. So the NDP has not commented. I asked them to comment. I asked JAMA's people to comment on all of these allegations, and nothing. The only response was tearing down hundreds of tweets.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the police thing is not new. I mean, she's made headlines because of some of those comments and of others, but I mean, she's the one that's running for office here, saying Hamilton police actually protect Nazism and continue to target black Muslims and Palestinians. And as you mentioned, it goes on to say dismantle and abolish the police. The questions you asked both of her campaign and got no response at all. You also sent them to Mart Stiles' office. They, I guess, acknowledged that they received it, but you haven't heard back from them. But you did mention that she did tell a reporter from the Toronto Sun that she continues to support Jama's candidacy. So does that also mean that she endorses Jama's views on these issues?
Well, I think it's a fair question, and frankly, I think it's a fair question to ask the local media. If the Spectator wants her to win, the honorable thing to do would be to run an editorial and endorse her. But of course, to do that, then you would invite the question of whether you agree with these anti-police, these very extreme anti-police, these questionable comments about Israel and so on, and maybe even why she has railed against the NDP. So, but this, I call it airbrushing. They're just totally ignoring what are really some significant statements on her part. And and as for the Mart Stiles and the Ontario NDP, I couldn't help but think that this party has had to defend itself against anti-Semitism attacks. And I couldn't help but think that, probably the two most significant leaders the Ontario NDP ever had were Bob Rae and Stephen Lewis, both statesmen, both Jews. And I don't think either gentleman would want to be within a 10-foot pole of this party right now, because it really does appear to have a problem within its ranks with this whole Israel-Palestinian issue.
I don't want to go over the history of this, but I mean, I think it's important to bring this up because your points about Ray and Lewis, I think, are well placed here. And by the way, David Lewis before that, of course, on the federal scene, Stephen Lewis's dad.
Right.
So I don't know where this turn came about, because all of a sudden this is an undercurrent, and it's not just in the Hamilton area NDP. It seems to be happening with the Ontario Party right now. And you're right, nobody seems to want to talk about this, although every now and then these comments rise to the surface once again, and there's a bit of a furor for a day or two. But kudos to the B'nai B'rith, by the way, for calling her out on this. But once again, it seems to fall on deaf ears.
Yeah, it does. And what all this tells me, this lack of response from the NDP, is that they think hanging on to this seat is more important than being accused of turning a blind eye to some of these very extreme views that have been expressed. It's all about hanging on to the seat. And if you think about it, I mean, this seat really is meaningless in terms of the NDP. We're in a majority government situation, which we're going to be for the next almost 4 years. One seat more or less from their total wouldn't really make any difference. And here's another thing that just shows the ultimate hypocrisy of this. At the time the nominations were taking place for this seat, there was apparently at least one other person that was kicking the tires about running, a guy named Sam Kaplan. And he was told that he could not be green-lit as a candidate because of his social media comportment. Apparently, he had posted something that head office found out about. So if they're checking out his social media, his sites, and saying you're not eligible to run because you put something up there that was controversial, surely they had also looked at Sarah Jama's social media and chose not to do anything about it.
But in a situation like that, I go back to my previous comment. If they say nothing, do nothing. Does that indicate to me, by process of elimination, that they're okay with those views? That that's fine. No big deal. And then we would be supportive of somebody like this. And your point here, and I know B'nai B'rith is basically asking the NDP to remove her as the candidate. Now, I know the election's only a week away, but there is a precedent for this where political parties during an election will find out, or usually they don't discover it, somebody else does, discover some rather unsavory comments, sometimes in the past on social media about any number of different things, and they ask them to step down. I guess that's not going to happen here.
No, and as I said in the story, we're not dredging up something from 10 or 15 years ago that a kid did in high school. We're some of this, calling the police supporting Nazism. She made that comment less than 2 years ago, at which point she was a well-educated young woman. This isn't some childish prank that everybody would like to take back. This is stuff done since she's become a public figure.
So, as I mentioned, the by-election is next week, and I am surprised, quite frankly, as well, John, that nobody seems to be paying much attention, and traditionally they don't do that in by-elections. But it doesn't matter as far as the power balance at Queen's Park does. But there's a symbolism, I think, to the quality of candidates that run in these elections, and that doesn't seem to be resonating with anybody right now. It's very frustrating.
Well, I think the Merritt Stiles says she's going to be a wonderful representative for the riding. So what we're going to end up with, Bill, if she's elected, is now we have anti-police political representatives at all three levels in the lower city. And I don't think that's reflective of what the people that are living down there coping with high crime rates. I don't think that's what they're feeling. I don't think that's reflective of the voters down there, but it's a by-election, Bill, so there you go.
Yeah, exactly.